At my brother's CEO party, he announced he wanted to acquire my little company, saying, "It's time for Chin Solutions to have real qualified leadership in front of everyone." I stood up and walked to the podium. The room fell completely silent. 200 of Silicon Valley's most influential people, investors, executives, tech leaders, all watched as I smoothed my simple black dress, the one my mother had criticized earlier for not being formal enough. My heart was pounding, but something cold and calculating had settled in my mind. Michael stood there with that same smug expression he'd worn our entire lives, expecting me to gracefully fold under pressure, like I always had as the family disappointment. But as I looked out at the faces in the crowd, I recognized more than he realized. The CEO of Data Flow Industries, whose entire security infrastructure ran on my systems. The CTO of Meridian Financial, who'd personally called me last month to renew their $2 million annual contract. The founder of Cloud Tech Solutions, who'd been trying to poach my lead developers for 6 months. "Thank you for that interesting offer, Michael," I said quietly into the microphone, my voice carrying clearly through the Ritz-Carlton ballroom. "I'll have my response ready first thing tomorrow morning." Then I walked out, leaving behind the whispers and confused murmurs. In my car, I pulled out my phone and began typing emails. It was going to be a very long night, but by morning they would learn exactly what this dropout could do. What my family had never understood was that while they saw me as the black sheep who'd thrown away her potential, I'd spent 15 years building something they couldn't comprehend. I wasn't just some small business owner playing with computers in a garage anymore. I was the CEO of a company that had quietly become essential infrastructure for thousands of businesses worldwide. The backstory was simple enough. When I dropped out of community college 15 years ago, my Stanford professor father couldn't even look at me. My mother cried for weeks. Michael, home from Harvard on spring break, had said with that trademark smirk, "Well, sister, I guess someone has to be the family disappointment. Don't worry. When I'm running a Fortune 500 company, I'll give you a job in the mailroom." That night in my garage workspace, surrounded by circuit boards and half-finished prototypes, I'd made a promise to myself. I would succeed not by following their prescribed path of degrees and credentials, but by solving real problems in the real world. The first few years were brutal. While Michael posted photos from glamorous MBA networking events, I was sleeping on a futon in my one-room office, living on ramen and coffee. But I had identified a massive gap in the cybersecurity market that no one else was addressing. Big companies were focused on complex, expensive enterprise solutions. Small businesses were left completely vulnerable, unable to afford or implement the existing options. So I developed Security Shield, a simple but powerful security suite that small businesses could actually afford and understand. The first version was rough, but it worked. Word spread through small business networks. One client became 10, then 100. By year 3, we landed our first $1 million contract. But here's what my family never grasped. I hadn't stopped there. While they dismissed my work as cute tinkering, I was systematically building a technology empire. Security Shield was just the foundation. Over the years, we'd developed proprietary encryption algorithms, advanced threat detection systems, and automated security protocols that were years ahead of our competition. More importantly, I'd been obsessively documenting everything. As someone who'd started with nothing and fought for every contract, I maintained detailed records of every client relationship, every patent filing, every piece of intellectual property we'd developed. My filing system was more comprehensive than most law firms. Receipts organized by category, contracts filed chronologically, a detailed database tracking every business relationship and financial transaction. My current position was stronger than anyone realized. Chin Solutions now employed 847 people across 12 offices worldwide. Our annual revenue had hit $340 million last year, with profit margins that would make most tech executives weep with envy. We held 247 active patents, with another 93 pending approval. Our client base included 23 Fortune 500 companies, including several that Michael's own consulting firm worked with regularly. Most crucially, I'd spent the last 5 years quietly acquiring smaller cybersecurity firms and integrating their technologies into our platform. What looked like a small business security company from the outside was actually a comprehensive technology conglomerate with tentacles throughout the industry. My personal financial position was equally solid. My equity stake in the company was worth approximately $180 million, based on our most recent valuation. I had $3.22 million in liquid assets, a diversified investment portfolio worth another $12 million, and real estate holdings valued at $8 million. Unlike Michael, who was highly leveraged and dependent on his corporate salary, I had genuine financial independence. But the real advantage I possessed was information. Through our client relationships and business intelligence gathering, I knew exactly how vulnerable Michael's consulting firm was to disruption. Their entire technology division, the one he'd just been promoted to lead, was built on outdated assumptions about the cybersecurity market. They were trying to sell expensive, complex solutions to clients who were increasingly demanding simpler, more cost-effective alternatives. Even better, I knew their financials. When you provide cybersecurity services to a company, you get insight into their operational vulnerabilities. Michael's firm was hemorrhaging clients to more agile competitors. Their technology division was operating at a loss, propped up by revenue from other parts of the business. The board was looking for someone to blame when the numbers came in at the end of the quarter. Michael had just made himself that target by publicly announcing an aggressive expansion into my market space, a market where I held dominant position and he had no meaningful expertise. The next morning, I arrived at Chin Solutions headquarters at 6 a.m., hours before our usual start time. As I walked through the quiet offices, I touched the sleek glass walls and modern workstations, everything I'd built from nothing while my family was busy doubting me. The early morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows illuminated the awards and recognition plaques covering one wall. Technology Innovation Award 2019, Small Business Security Provider of the Year 2020, Forbes Rising Star Company 2021. At precisely 9 a.m., the elevator doors opened. Michael strolled in, followed by Dad and 2 men in expensive suits, presumably his company's lawyers. His triumphant smile faltered slightly when he saw me sitting calmly at our main conference room table, laptop open, documents arranged in neat stacks. "Rachel," he said, straightening his custom-made tie, "I'm glad you're here. These are our attorneys, James Patterson and Robert Chen. They've prepared the acquisition paperwork. I think you'll find our offer very generous considering my limitations?" I finished for him, smiling. "Please sit down. I have some documents of my own to share." They settled into the leather chairs, Michael already reaching for what he assumed were resignation papers. Instead, I opened my laptop and connected it to the room's main screen. "Before we discuss your offer, there are a few things you should know about my little company." I began pulling up the first document. "This is Chin Solutions' current valuation, $340 million in annual revenue, $127 million in profit, as verified by 3 independent firms last month." Michael's smirk wavered. "That's impossible. Our research showed—" "Your research," I cut him off, "was based on public filings that only show a fraction of our operations. You see, while you were collecting degrees, I was collecting patents." I clicked to the next slide. Chin Solutions holds 247 active patents for cybersecurity technologies, with another 93 pending approval. The visible company, the one you thought you could acquire, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I clicked to the next slide. These are our current client lists. Notice anything interesting? Dad leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. His face went pale as he read the names, including Michael's own consulting firm listed under Enterprise Clients, Annual Contracts over $1 million. That's right, I continued. Your company's entire cybersecurity infrastructure runs on our systems, has for the past 3 years. In fact, I pulled up another document. That $47 million deal you're so proud of, Michael. The client chose your firm specifically because you promised them our Security Shield Enterprise suite as part of the package. Michael's face had turned an interesting shade of gray. But that's impossible. I would have known. Would you? I asked softly. Did you ever actually investigate who developed the security systems you've been selling? Or did you just assume, like always, that anything I touched couldn't possibly be important? The lawyers were frantically flipping through their papers, realizing their due diligence had missed something massive. I wasn't done yet. Here's the most interesting part. I displayed the final document. Remember that graceful exit you offered me? Well, I have a counterproposal. I slid folders across the table to each of them. Chin Solutions just acquired your consulting firm's entire technology division. The board approved it last night, unanimously. They were particularly impressed by our quantum encryption technology and our proposal to integrate their client base into our existing platform. Michael practically ripped open the folder, his hands shaking. This is a joke. The board would never. The board that consists mainly of Chin Solutions clients? I asked innocently. The same board that depends on our security systems to protect billions in assets. That board. Dad was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. One of the lawyers, James Patterson, had already pulled out his phone, presumably confirming my claims with someone back at their office. His face grew increasingly pale as he listened to whoever was on the other end. So here's what's going to happen, I continued, my voice steady. You have 2 options, Michael. Option 1, you resign from the technology division effective immediately. You'll receive a generous severance package of $180,000 and a glowing recommendation for any non-competing industry. And option 2, he whispered, his arrogance finally cracking. Option 2, I release the records showing how your division has been taking credit for Chin Solutions innovations for years, billing clients for our proprietary systems while claiming they were developed in-house. I'm sure Harvard Business Review would love that story. Ivy League CEO caught passing off sister's work as his own. The room fell silent. Through the glass walls, I could see our employees arriving for the day, watching the scene with curious expressions. You wouldn't, Michael said, but his voice lacked conviction. We're family. Family? I laughed softly. Last night you called me unqualified, inadequate, and limited. You tried to steal my company in front of everyone we know. That's not family, Michael. That's just bad business. Dad finally found his voice. Rachel, surely we can discuss this. Your brother didn't mean... He meant every word, I cut him off. Just like you meant it every time you dismissed my work as tinkering. Just like Mom meant it every time she suggested my success was just luck. I stood up, smoothing my dress, the same inadequate one from the night before. The acquisition papers are legally binding. The press release goes out in 1 hour. Your choice, Michael. Quiet resignation or public scandal. The documentation I'd prepared was exhaustive. Every contract, every client relationship, every piece of intellectual property was meticulously recorded and legally protected. I'd spent years building not just a company, but an unassailable position in the market. My legal team had been working on this acquisition for 6 months, identifying vulnerabilities in Michael's division and building relationships with their parent company's board members. 20 minutes later, I watched from my office window as Michael stormed out of the building, Dad hurrying after him. The lawyers stayed behind to work out the details of the transition and Michael's resignation package. James Patterson looked shell-shocked as he reviewed the acquisition documents, realizing how thoroughly they'd been outmaneuvered. The acquisition had been in planning for 6 months. My business development team had identified Michael's technology division as vulnerable, hemorrhaging clients, and operating at a loss. When their parent company's board, which included several Chin Solutions clients, approached us about a buyout, it became a straightforward business decision. Michael's public announcement at the party had simply accelerated our timeline. Instead of a gradual acquisition, we moved to an immediate takeover. His arrogant attempt to acquire my company had handed me the perfect cover for eliminating a struggling competitor while expanding our market share. That evening, Mom called from their home in Palo Alto crying about how I'd destroyed Michael's career. I let it go to voicemail. Instead, I focused on the email I'd just received from Harvard Business School inviting me to give their commencement speech next spring. The topic? Innovation without limits, success beyond traditional paths. I accepted the invitation immediately, already planning what I would say. After all, I had quite a story to tell. The consequences for my family unfolded over the following months with mathematical precision. Michael struggled to find employment in the technology sector, where word of the acquisition had spread quickly through professional networks. The story of how he'd tried to acquire his sister's company only to lose his own division became Silicon Valley legend. He eventually took a position with Desert Vista Real Estate in Phoenix, earning $78,000 annually, less than half his previous salary. Dad retired early from Stanford, finally understanding that credentials don't always equal competence. The academic community had heard about his daughter's success and his son's spectacular failure, making his position uncomfortable. Mom gradually stopped suggesting I needed more education, though she never quite apologized for 15 years of dismissive comments. The financial impact was substantial and measurable. The acquisition of Michael's technology division added $78 million in annual revenue to Chin Solutions, while eliminating our primary competitor in the mid-market sector. Our valuation increased by $240 million within 6 months. My personal net worth crossed the $300 million threshold when we completed our Series D funding round. 6 months later, we took Chin Solutions public. The IPO raised $890 million and valued the company at $2 billion. Forbes featured me on their cover with the headline, "The Dropout Who Built a Cybersecurity Empire." Harvard Business School added my case study to their curriculum as an example of disruptive innovation in traditional markets. Michael reached out once, through LinkedIn, asking if there might be opportunities for him at Chin Solutions. I responded professionally, suggesting he explore our entry-level business development positions, which started at $45,000 annually, roughly what he'd made in his first job out of Harvard 15 years earlier. He never responded. James Patterson, one of the lawyers who'd represented Michael's firm, later joined our legal team. During his interview, he admitted, "I've never seen such thorough preparation and strategic thinking. You had contingencies for contingencies we didn't even know existed." Robert Chen, the other lawyer, returned to his firm and became something of a cautionary tale about the importance of proper due diligence. The story of how they'd walked into that conference room completely unprepared became required reading for junior associates. Today, as I write this from my corner office overlooking Silicon Valley, Chin Solutions employs over 2,000 people worldwide and generates more than $600 million in annual revenue. We've acquired 17 companies and expanded into artificial intelligence and quantum computing. The garage where I started this journey is now a museum for company tours, preserved exactly as it was during those first brutal years. Dad occasionally sends brief emails about family news, always formal and distant. Mom still struggles with the reality that her disappointing daughter became more successful than her golden child. Michael has never contacted me directly since that LinkedIn message, though I hear through mutual acquaintances that he's doing adequately in real estate, selling mid-range properties to retirees in Arizona. The transformation was complete. The daughter who'd once absorbed every dismissive comment and condescending suggestion had become a woman who understood her true worth, measured not in degrees or family approval, but in the problems solved and the value created for millions of users worldwide. They'd called me the family disappointment while I was building something they couldn't comprehend. The irony was perfect. Their disappointment had become their greatest source of pride, though they'd never admit it publicly. And I'd learned that sometimes the most powerful response to being underestimated is simply to prove, through methodical execution and strategic patience, exactly how wrong the doubters were. The lesson was clear. When people show you who they really are through their actions and words, believe them. And when they underestimate your capabilities while overestimating their own, sometimes the best strategy is to let them dig their own graves while you quietly build an empire they never saw coming.